suppliers. He will also examine who makes up the core group of critical project community members without whom the Agile Analytics project cannot succeed. In addition, Ken will discuss the collaboration characteristics shared by effective analytics teams and how you can become an effective leader who fosters these characteristics. He will also cover the benefits achieved by organizations that are being Agile versus those who are merely do Agile. Ken Collier is Director of Cutter Consortium's Data Insight and Social BI practice and a Senior Consultant with Agile Product and Project Management practice. He is a leader in combining Agile methods with data warehousing, business intelligence, and advanced analytics, disciplines that present a unique set of challenges to the incremental and evolutionary style of Agile development. Ken has successfully adapted Agile techniques to data warehousing and business intelligence to create the Agile Analytics style. He continues to refine these ideas as a technical lead and project manager on several data warehousing and business intelligence project teams. Ken also frequently trains data warehousing and business intelligence teams in Agile Analytics, giving him the opportunity to exercise this approach with various technologies, team dynamics, and industry domains. Welcome, Ken.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a good week. I know you've made it midway through the week and you got a little bit further to go. Hope everyone's having a good week this week. I'm in Santa Monica in a hotel room, so if it looks like a hotel in the back of me, that's why. I hope everyone can hear me well, and I guess you can send a message on the chat if you're having any trouble, and Mark will help you out with that. As Mark mentioned, I've been focused on Agile data warehousing and business intelligence and analytics for some years now. And I've been able to establish kind of or begin to recognize a series of patterns. And actually, I guess that one of the ways I'll kick this off is that I'm seeing a collection of a set of patterns that are really good if you don't want to be good at Agile, if you don't want your Agile to be successful. And I thought I might share those with you today. These are kind of consistent patterns, consistent behaviors that I'm seeing from within companies that I'm working with. And I'm going to make an assumption, and it may be a wrong one, but I'll do it anyway, and that is that that you are part of an organization that has already adopted Agile in your data warehousing, business intelligence, and analytics work, and that you are you've made some progress along the way. Probably Scrum related, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So if I'm wrong about that, feel free to weigh in. So this is not an introduction to Agile discussion. This is a discussion on how you can be, well, I'll say this is a discussion on how you can fail at Agile if you want to. I'm hopeful that I can give you some other alternatives as well. So with that said, let's see if I can control this. I'm not going to repeat the Agile Manifesto. I'll assume that most everyone knows this. But what I do want to point out here is that the Agile Manifesto has done a really powerful job of giving us a set of core values and guiding principles around which we can develop and tailor and customize and shape our Agile practices. Unfortunately, many companies have tried to adopt a one-size-fits-all prescriptive recipe for Agile, and I'm seeing more and more corporate leaders, CIOs, and IT leaders who are saying we're not realizing the benefits of Agile that we expected. We've adopted Scrum. We bought everybody a book. We sent our project managers to Scrum Master training, and projects don't seem to be any more on schedule or within budget or successful than they were before. So I just want to reiterate something, and that is that Agile is not a one-size-fits-all prescriptive methodology. It's a technique and a style of working that's based on these 4 core values and a set of 12 guiding principles that will help you adjust to a mindset of continuous delivery of value to the business. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I want to do is kind of step through a series of patterns that that you may be experiencing in your own organization and give you some thoughts for how to address some of these things. One of the first ones I see is a fear of collaboration. And I'll call it fear, but it may also be for other purposes rather than fear. But it's a general breakdown in the collaboration that is important between customers and the development community, the delivery team. Often this is manifest as business analysts are the customers and they are the voice of the customers, and they completely substitute for the customers. I value business analysts, but they are not a completely valid substitute for the customers. We see symptoms like the team might want to meet with actual end users, business users, watch them do their work and discuss their problems, and leaders, of both business leaders and IT leaders, might have a tendency to respond with, we know better than the users what they need. Users don't understand business intelligence. They don't understand architecture and the complexity of data. They haven't spent time thinking about the system like we have. Let's not waste our time and users' time. Let's use a business analyst instead. The cause is often a misconception that Agile is primarily an IT process, which really masks the highest priority, that Agile is a business process. Agile is about delivering value to the business and listening to what the business has to say and needs from us as Agile data warehouse and BI practitioners. Agile data warehousing can be a rude awakening for leaders. It necessarily changes the way we interact with the business units and business divisions within our organizations, and we need to adapt ideas about how to interact with these business users in a more frequent and collaborative fashion. Ultimately, the measure of success or failure of a project is not really scope, schedule, and cost, but it's customer delight. It's business user satisfaction. Did we give them something that they wanted? Certainly, scope, schedule, and cost is important from a management and control perspective, but it's not the ultimate measure of whether a project was successful or not. Another thing I see is the avoidance of transparency, and sometimes this is avoidance intentionally, and other times it is avoidance just out of old habits die hard. Agile, the value of transparency is this. Historically, we have worked on projects as a delivery team. After requirements have been analyzed, gathered, documented, and signed off, we leave the rest of the business community alone, instead, including our management stakeholders as well as our business stakeholders, business users, and we go away, we go into a dark place, and we build our systems the way that we think they're supposed to be built. And we've created a habit that's very hard to break, and that is creating a sense of openness, transparency, visibility into the process, including some things that are not so pretty. Often we work on complex, hard problems, and often we fail to share those difficult challenges with our community. Sometimes some of the symptoms that I see of this are leaders measuring the wrong things, teams creating stone walls that kind of mask the problems, challenges, or sometimes incremental failure to deliver problems that we bump up against. Sometimes I see data warehousing practitioners that aren't bought into Agile, but they're part of a team that has adopted Agile, and so there is a tendency of individuals to want to prove that Agile doesn't really work, or that it can't work here, or that the situation is so unique that this is not appropriate. And so there's a stonewalling effect that happens when individuals behave in that way. Sometimes developers feel threatened by giving visibility into their individual work. We in data warehousing are a community of specialists. We have our master ETL developers, our master data modelers, our master BI developers, and so on and so forth. And there's often a tendency, a reluctance to open the kimono and let others see the work that we're doing for better or for worse, and that sort of fear of code visibility or development visibility can lead to this avoidance of transparency. We also sometimes see a fear of a loss of stardom. I often see real superstars on teams who don't want to relinquish that superstarness by sharing their skills, sharing their knowledge, or sharing the success that they have. It's important that we shift into a measure of the delivery of value and quality at the team level rather than a measure of contribution of individuals. And I'll talk a little more about measuring the right things in a few minutes. The other really important thing to this transparency avoidance problem is creating, Agile leaders need to create a culture of trust and mutual goals, helping the team understand that they aren't going to be punished for having a difficult, challenging sprint, for example. These are the kinds of things that leaders need to be doing to help enable this transparency. Command and control leadership dies hard. I see this in most companies I work in. They're often, especially older companies, have been built on a command and control style hierarchy, and it's hard to shift away from that mindset on Agile projects and programs. However, when this happens, what happens with the team is that the team begins to avoid making its own decisions. The team begins to use the command and control style of its leaders as an excuse for why things didn't get done. The team was told to do a certain thing. We couldn't do it. It wasn't feasible, but it wasn't our decision. So we didn't fail. Management failed because they gave us the wrong thing to do or assigned something that wasn't feasible. I see this at the Scrum Master level. Often I see Scrum Masters who are former PMI style project managers. They've gone away and they've gotten Scrum Master certification, but they still behave in ways that are management oriented, viewing themselves as the director of the team. Viewing that Scrum Masters are sometimes viewed by leadership as the authority figure in the team rather than the coach, the facilitator, and the enabler. So if you're a Scrum Master on this call, I hope that you'll think about your role as a Scrum Master fundamentally different than a more traditional, conventional project manager role. Sometimes I see teams that have their planning done for them. The technical leader combined with the Scrum Master combined with the product owner might get together and do all of the sprint planning, and the team just waits to be told what to do. This is unfortunate because we want teams to be self-managing and self-organizing, and they aren't really allowed to do that if they're being told what their plan is rather than being actively involved in the acceptance and commitment to the plan. And this is both at the sprint level and at the release planning level, which we can talk about in a little bit. I had a recent conversation with a director, an IT director, in this discussion about self-organizing, self-managing teams that make their own sprint level commitments. And this director said, I prefer to assign the engineering task to the team so that I'm confident that the work is evenly distributed. In other words, he was worried that one person might shoulder the burden of the work, so he viewed his role as to delegate the engineering level tasks. This is not just at the story level, this is down at the fine-grained engineering level of detail. He also argued that he needed to assign the tasks to make sure that everybody was always working and there weren't people that were running idle. Basically, he was micromanaging, and he was having a hard time. Of course, he wouldn't have used the word micromanaging, but he was having a hard time relinquishing that microscopic view into what everyone was working on. Self-organization comes with self-responsibility, and so we need to hold teams accountable, but we need to give them the latitude to make some mistakes and take ownership of those mistakes as well as their successes as they become better at being agile. I see this in some organizations that I work in, especially companies that have done a broader agile transformation, including agile data warehousing and business intelligence, but also including software, product management, etc., other areas. And the fundamental principle is build project around motivated individuals and give them the environment and support they need, trust them to get the job done. What sometimes happens in this environment is that there is a loss of sense of who is managing, who is leading, and is it just this sort of chaotic everybody's managing, or is it somebody, some clear person to set constraints and provide some guidelines and guidance. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, project manager is perceived in as a management role. Other times, technical architect is perceived as a management role. These roles can be confusing for teams who have been given the action of self-managing when they're in the habit of looking for an individual to lead them. So it's really important to sort of check organizational titles at the door, but to establish a project management atmosphere that enables the team to sort of select who leads and how they lead, and that everyone understands that the team may self-manage at the delivery level, but there still needs to be IT leadership that is providing strategic vision, strategic guidance, establishing constraints around the project. Those things don't go away. So Agile is not an abdication of leadership. It's a different definition of how leadership works. Similarly, I see this a lot. This ownership abdication, developers that are afraid to make decisions without input from everyone. They don't want to take ownership of of making a design choice or making an implementation choice. Developers who always expect direction from management because they are afraid to make a commitment because it might get them in trouble. Customer community who expects the delivery team to figure out what they want. The user community, customer community doesn't want to take ownership of giving clear and direct guidance about what the outcomes should be, what the features, the BI features and capabilities should look like. Product owners who fail to keep the backlog up to date. These kinds of things result in often look like a them versus us discussion. Developers who say, "Well, I'm happy to do the work. I just need to be told what I'm supposed to work on." Product owners who say, well, the team needs to choose what they're going to work on next because they know the complexities, the risks, the data dependencies. Customer communities who say, well, I've already given my input to the team, they should know what I need. These kinds of attitudes created them versus us division between the stakeholders, the customers, and the delivery team members. Generally, this is caused by a lack of trust across the project community. So I think of a project community as having those three subgroups, the management stakeholders, the customers, the business users, and then the third community is the delivery team members, including project managers, developers, architects, modelers, quality assurance. Those three communities form the entire project community, and when there's a lack of trust across those community boundaries, this sort of ownership abdication can happen, and it causes a real breakdown in the ability to continuously deliver the next most important thing or valuable thing. I fight this problem by emphasizing collaborative release level planning. So I really want to have everyone in the room together for the short horizon release planning of 4 to 6 months. I really want everyone to be actively engaged and involved in the end of sprint demos as well as the retrospectives, so that we can have a shared conversation about how to continuously improve in our Agile processes. And then I want to emphasize daily collaboration across these boundaries to break down this preconceived notion that after customers have given their input, they should be left alone for long periods of time, which takes us back to the problems that we've had in the past with conventional methods. One of the most common, and maybe I should have led with this topic, one of the most common problems that I see today, I think probably in the last 2 years, Agile Analytics and data warehousing has really exploded. I'm seeing an increasing number of organizations that have adopted Agile and are looking for ways to adapt that to their data warehousing and BI practice areas and development projects. What I see, however, is frequently buy everybody a Scrum book, send the project managers to Scrum Master training, and call ourselves Agile. I like Scrum. I think Scrum has a lot of valuable practices to add. It actually has about 9 practices, artifacts, and roles that it defines, but it's not enough. Scrum by itself is not sufficient for all of the complexities and challenges that we face in data warehousing and business intelligence. When I see teams that say, we hold a daily stand-up meeting, we have 3 roles, Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Technical Champion, and they have 3+1 ceremonies every sprint, that definition of Agile often leads to a sense that Agile doesn't work because we're doing these things and yet we're not, things aren't significantly better than they were before. We need to augment Scrum with other important contributions from other flavors of Agile, like extreme programming, Agile project management from Jim Highsmith and others. So one of the problems that I frequently see, in fact, I've worked with a couple of companies in the last few weeks that both have this problem, is that they're doing sprint level planning, but there's no clear sense of where they've been or where they're going on their projects. So we need short horizon release planning as well as strategic road mapping on our projects. We need project automation. Many Agile data warehousing teams skip this necessary step of automating their tests, automating their builds, automating their deployments, and this project automation is a challenging hurdle that's not going to get cleared overnight, but it's a really essential one that you should be considering in your organization. Co-locating teams. I recently worked with a company where the data warehouse group was on one floor, sitting in various cubicles, and the BI group was sitting on another floor in various cubicles, and their degree of collaboration and interaction was extremely low, even though they were all in the same building together. Now, most of you probably work in companies where you have geographical distribution, and so you're not physically co-located, but there are opportunities to find ways to virtually co-locate, talk via Skype, continuously, sitting as close to each other as possible, and then coming together for planning sessions. Pairing is a very valuable skill for, or technique for sharing skills across different skill sets and within the team. And then behavior-driven development or story test-driven development is a very powerful technique. These are all things that are outside of Scrum, but augmentations to Scrum that make a more complete Agile process definition. And each of your organizations will come up with its own tailored version of Agile, and it may or may not include Scrum practices, and it should include some of these other practices that we mentioned. So these are the symptoms of this are, this buy everyone a book and call it good, and then wonder why Agile is not working. We talk about the continuous delivery of production quality value to the customer community or the user community. Working software is the primary measure of progress, and yet I frequently see cases where quality remains as a back-end step. Quality assurance is a challenging thing in our complex data warehousing architectures. Ensuring that the information quality at the presentation layer, as well as the data warehousing, data integration layers of the architecture, that takes a lot of effort. And if you're doing all of this manually, then it's going to continuously be a bottleneck in your process. So test automation is key. I've seen a few different symptoms of this. One team that I worked with recently had the sense that Agile means no quality assurance and no documentation, and effectively they had used Agile as an excuse to take unreasonable shortcuts in their process. Management was surprised or wondering why the product that was being developed was fairly shoddy. I see teams that continue to view the QA as a separate gatekeeping group that's at the back end of the process. So defects accumulate over many, many sprints, and then there's a tail end QA step that remains a very conventional style system test, and it becomes a bottleneck at the back end. Developers that don't view testing as part of their jobs. ETL developers, database developers, SQL programmers, etc. Testing is part of all of our jobs. Continuous testing throughout the sprint, and the delivery of high quality working features, BI features, every sprint is essential. There's several different antidotes to this problem. First of all, focusing on automating tests. I've said this a lot in the past, and I've written about it quite a bit. I feel very, very passionately that if we do not automate our tests, we don't start automating our tests today and get better at it continuously, we will be very limited in how agile we can be. The problem is that if I create high quality working features in this sprint, how do I guarantee that 5 sprints from now I'm not breaking the things that we're working in the sprint that we're in currently? We need a rigorous definition of what done really means. We shouldn't have lingering quality assurance issues when we believe that we're done with a data integration step or a BI feature delivery. I strongly prefer QA not be a siloed organization. They should be integrated and embedded within the team, and they should be guiding the team at the beginning of every sprint with story tests, acceptance tests, and definition of done for each of the stories that are committed to. This is related to, let's see, jump to the next slide here. If you're as old as me, you know who this guy is. This is Mr. Freeze from the old Batman series back in the 1960s. Something interesting that I have seen, and I guess I understand this, we talk about, in the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Values, we talk about adapting to change over following a plan. We welcome changing requirements even late in development, and yet Change is disruptive. We tend to be afraid of change. We tend to want to freeze the backlog. We use terms like scope creep. Scope creep is an indicator. When I work with organizations that use the term scope creep, that's an indicator to me that they haven't fully embraced this idea of changing requirements even late in development. Developers sometimes expect the backlog to be fully prioritized and rock solid, including all acceptance criteria before they begin working. So they kind of hold a strike until all of that work is done. That's sort of like asking for all the requirements to be fixed and frozen before development work can begin. Developers sometimes expect the business to finalize the backlog before work starts. Sometimes the business views the backlog as an official definition of scope, and they expect the entire backlog to be delivered at the end of the project cycle, and don't understand that it's a malleable, changing, dynamic artifact of Agile development. I sometimes see organizations who want to maintain change control procedures in order to change and manage the backlog effectively. These are all sorts of behaviors that basically use conventional style project management overlaid onto Agile terminology. The backlog is simply a placeholder for a collection of requirements that we call user stories, that are not fully analyzed and specified yet. And over time, we expect those things to change. What is really important is for the business to understand that as things change, there's going to be negotiation about which things are most important and which things might need to be deprioritized, so that the business is not expecting to just add more and more and more to the backlog. Typically, the cause of this is that developers are afraid that the business only wants to add things, not subtract things from the scope. And there is a tendency of many development teams and business user communities to think of the backlog as just a definition of everything that must be done to declare finished, as opposed to the idea that there is a time-boxed cut line on the backlog that defines within the capacity of the team how much the team can deliver in the project cycle that's been planned for. So we need to really work with both management, customer community, and development communities to understand the idea of collaborative bartering in order to deliver the right thing, but within the capacity of the team to work at a sustainable pace. There's a big part of this comes through collaborative planning, collaborative prioritization with both product owner and actual business users, continuous backlog grooming by the product owner, acknowledging that the backlog is just an organized wish list with that virtual cut line that's based on team capacity. Trust. We need our business users to later doesn't mean never. Something that's lower on the backlog, we still intend to do it and deliver it if it remains important, but it may be deferred until other more important things are done. Also, trust that lower priority doesn't mean low priority. It just means that it falls lower than some other things. This is, oops. Sorry, let me jump back. This is a common problem. I see this a lot, and you may see this in your own groups, Scrum or Fall. So we're doing Scrum. We have our time box sprints, maybe 3 weeks long, maybe 4 weeks long. Often when I see Scrum or Fall, I see 4-week-long sprints, which is not a bad thing, but 2 weeks would be a shorter feedback cycle. This often looks like a 1-2-1 pattern. Brad Wilson is an Agilist who uses this term, where we have 1 week of design, 2 weeks of coding, 1 week of test and integration, and then we're done with our sprint. So there's just a little mini waterfall happening within that sprint. So when you have this, testers are on hold until late in the iteration. Developers can't get started until analysts and requirements engineers are finished. There's still this notion of skill set silos or or functional silos, people doing workflow steps and then handing off to another group and handing off to another group and so on and so forth. When the team starts time slicing iterations into these discrete phases, this is a sure sign that you've got Scrum or Fall happening. When this happens, there's one thing, the number one thing I really like to do when this happens is drive testing to the front end of the sprint. Test definition gets done right after story commitment and the story conference. The testers, together with the product owner and the technical lead, define the acceptance test and the acceptance criteria for all of the stories in that sprint. Then we're doing behavior-driven or story test-driven development. And through that definition of acceptance, we're also doing the necessary analysis and specification, and everyone should be collaboratively involved in this process so that we're sharing the skills instead of working in these functional silos of developers versus testers versus requirements analysts, etc. So really, this really helps to do that. If you find that you're doing this, really seek to think about sprinting as a daily process of analysis, a little bit of analysis, a little bit of a design, a little bit of development, a little bit of testing, do it again, do it again, do it again. This is how we work. So those stages of problem solving are still very valuable. We just don't need to split them up into waterfall phases. We need to be doing them continuously and building a little bit as we go. You may have experienced these. You may have experienced these outside of your Agile workplace, but we won't talk about that. We'll talk about hangovers as a problem within Scrum teams or within Agile teams. What happens is a team will commit to deliver a certain collection of stories, and they'll get to the end of the sprint and they'll have maybe finished one of 3 stories or 2 of 5 stories, and there are several stories that are left unfinished, partially finished, or very nearly finished but just a little bit far from being done. This is caused by wish-based planning. We wish we could do more than the team has capacity to do. We didn't anticipate things like complexities in data integration or source to target mapping. We failed to consider the time that it would take to do good testing and make sure that we had high quality. In other words, we were extremely wishful in our planning, and we got bitten by not being able to deliver on our commitments. The worst cases of this are when teams don't when teams accept this behavior, when teams and managers and Scrum masters say, well, this is how we work, it's okay to have things hanging over from one sprint to the next. At least we delivered one thing, even though 2 other things were hanging over to the next sprint. This is how Agile projects go off the rails. Back in the the traditional conventional project, how do projects get late? They get late one day at a time. Well, Agile projects get late one sprint or one iteration at a time. When we have a commitment and we fail to honor those commitments and meet those commitments, everyone's expectations have just been disrupted. Agile is largely about continuously realigning expectations between the stakeholders, the customers, and the development team, and they're best kept in a line when teams work within their capacity and plan within their capacity. So conservative estimation, focus on undercommit and overdeliver. Limiting work in progress is a really powerful way. All of these kinds of things are teams may get burned one sprint by overcommitment. They should learn that lesson. Adapt, and the one principle that I talk about with teams is that with self-organization and self-management comes self-responsibility, honoring commitments, accountability, and several other things that can be difficult. So watch out for hangovers. This actually comes from Jens Caldaway, who's a Cutter Agile member of the Agile practice, and I really like how he describes the spinning wheel syndrome. This is a problem that I see from more mature Agile teams that have been doing Agile for a while, and they've gotten good at it. They're delivering on a nice steady rhythm. Every few weeks, they're delivering. They're meeting their commitments. They're planning within capacity, and yet the team exhibits this air of exhaustion and sort of dissatisfaction. They're not excited about their project anymore. Most of us have worked on, most projects that I work on, you reach points within the project cycle where it's you're kind of in the doldrums. It's not necessarily as exciting as it was in the beginning. It doesn't feel like you're making material progress, or maybe things aren't, the vision has shifted. These are all kind of normal aspects of a project. And so sometimes team members that fall into this trap of being in the spinning wheel, they've lost a sense of where they're headed and how successful they've been. I see this especially with teams who are sprinting and planning one sprint after the next, after the next, after the next, and they never really get a chance to stop, to pause, take a breath, and see how, and step back and see how the project is going. This is really important. A really important fix for this is breaking a long, complex project into short planning horizons, three or 4 to 6 months at most, with themes each of those during each of those planning horizons. This gives the team a short-term sense of what they're accomplishing, even if they happen to lose sight of the bigger product roadmap or BI roadmap that they're on. Taking time to reestablish the vision with the entire community. At the end of each of these planning horizons, it's important to do a retrospective that spans the entire release cycle or planning cycle, as well as the restatement of the long-term vision, strategic vision, and a restatement of the short-term vision, and the celebration at the end. Also, periodically, teams need a sprint off to work on something else. Not every month, not every quarter, but periodically, teams just need a break from working on the same thing sprint after sprint. You get what you measure. I frequently see managers and leaders that are using velocity as a measure of productivity or as a measure of progress. When this happens, when velocity is just one of the culprits, or the misuse of velocity, I should say, is one of the culprits. There are others as well, but velocity is a tempting metric to use to measure the team's performance. And I really want to emphasize that when you do this, if you're an IT leader and you're looking at velocity of a team to measure its performance, the team will respond in kind. They will work to boost their velocity, and it may be at the sacrifice of quality, both testing quality as well as implementation quality. So the long-term sustainability of the system suffers, as well as the the quality of the data and information that's being presented. People will naturally tend to work in ways that optimize however they're being measured. This is our human nature. We will seek to improve the measures by which we are being gauged. If management is overly focused on things like boosting productivity, shortening cycle time, or doing more with less, then the outcome, the product outcome, may suffer very much. So it's really important to focus on what it is that you want to measure. I think what we really want to measure in Agile is the value delivered, the quality of that value, of those components that were delivered, and customer satisfaction and happiness. Those are the kinds of things that are ultimately the indirect measures of the things that teams need to be doing to be better at being Agile. Be very, very cautious and aware of the unintended consequences of your metrics. So as you choose metrics to track and monitor a project in an Agile team, really think carefully through what the unintended consequences might be. I kind of alluded to this earlier. I see this frequently, and I think we've created our own monster because we have not bothered the customer for years, and now our Agile customers need to understand why we want to bother them. Typically, in fact, I just worked with a group last week that told me this problem. They've got a customer community that is unwilling and uninterested in being continuously involved in the project cycle, in the sprint reviews and sprint planning sessions, and so on and so forth. This first and foremost, I think the cause of this problem is that we tend to send project managers to Scrum Master training, and we expect everybody else to, we expect those Scrum Masters to share that knowledge with everyone else and kind of cross-train everybody. It's really important that we have our business stakeholders, our business users involved in some sort of Agile introduction and training. It doesn't have to be a 3-day workshop. It doesn't have to be a half-day workshop. It needs to be a socialization of what it means to be an Agile organization and what it means to be an Agile customer. The other thing that I strongly recommend is hand-selecting a group of what I call co-development partners. These are business users that work closely with your business analyst, if you have business analysts, and who are we take them through a little deeper training on what it means to be an Agile customer. We promise that we will not consume more than about 2 days a month of their time, and then it's our job to really carefully manage that time and make sure that that time is well spent. When you do this right, it won't take long before these co-development customers are delighted to be involved, and they're looking forward to their next opportunity to give input and feedback. These are the customers that will tend to not cancel the end of sprint demo. They'll be involved and interested in showing up to see what you've built for them next. We want these customers, these co-development customers to be involved in the initial visioning, chartering, and planning. This goes back to my Scrum is not enough statement. We need to have release planning or horizon planning sessions, chartering and planning sessions that include real customers with real opinions about what it is that we're supposed to be building. Change. We don't like change. It's in our nature not to like change. Change is disruptive. It's unsettling. We tend. I see this in groups that I work with, a tendency to try and keep formal change control processes in place. Meshing traditional change control with Agile doesn't really work very well. Trying to hold on to requirements freeze points. I mentioned this earlier when we talked about the backlog freeze problem. Sometimes when we talk about change, when I hear fear of change discussions, I also see management that tends to oscillate the team. Managers that want to interject change in the mid-sprint, which is disruptive to the team, rather than accepting that the change in the backlog or work priorities should be deferred until the next sprint. So there are some guidelines for making change, minimizing the disruption of change, but ultimately we want change because change means that we are responding to the true and adaptive needs of the customer and the business. We need to have some boundaries on what it is that we're working on in these short planning horizons, so that we're not getting oscillated between wildly shifting priorities versus micro shifting priorities. We need guidelines for limiting change, or at least negotiating the impact of change. I want to welcome change into the backlog. I don't want to welcome change into the current sprint, because the team has already made its commitments, done its analysis, and should be left alone to go ahead and deliver on those commitments. If you find that your team is talking about increasing the length of its iterations, really listen carefully for what are the reasons, what are the drivers behind the desire to increase the length of sprints or iterations. When I hear this, what I often hear is that teams haven't really developed the skills necessary for defining smaller, simpler chunks of value. This is often true for data warehousing practitioners who have a difficult time thinking about just pulling a few simple data elements through the architecture rather than pulling more comprehensive sets of data through, which takes more time and more effort and energy. If you find that you're changing the iteration length to fit the work that needs to be done, I would really encourage you to think in smaller, simpler terms. Cross-training within the delivery team to help reduce bottlenecks. If you find that there's one particular complex step in the workflow that is creating bottlenecks, this is a good time to cross-train so you don't have just one person or two people handling this. Kanban is actually a very effective technique, alternative to iterative development, that can allow for long-running tasks side by side with the continuous delivery of smaller, simpler chunks of value. What we want to do, and there's nothing sacred about the length of a sprint. Running 2-week sprints doesn't make you more agile than a team that's running 3 weeks. The challenge is with the feedback loop. The longer the feedback loop is, the more likely it is that you'll go farther off the rails, so to speak, if things are going to go wrong. Shorter feedback loops can realign expectations and understanding much more frequently. Therefore, seeking shorter iterations and sprints can be beneficial, but be sure you're not lengthening sprints just because you can't figure out how to do a sufficient amount of value delivery within shorter sprints. Finally, expectations management. I've seen managers who expect huge increases in productivity by adopting Agile. I frequently or occasionally get phone calls asking me if I can come and do training for the engineering team or the data warehousing team because they need to be able to deliver the same product in 2/3 the time that a traditional project would normally expect to deliver it. Management expects 30% increases in cycle time, or decreases, I should say, in cycle time. Management thinks of Agile as being able to do more with less. When I see these things and I hear these discussions about the perceived benefits of Agile, I see an opportunity to dispel some myths. Agile is not necessarily, although it frequently does improve productivity, but not because we can do more with less. It's because we're actually doing less. We're focused on the right thing. We're not overbuilding and over-architecting and designing systems. We're building small increments of functionality based on the needs of the business. Agile is not a silver bullet, and I suspect you've heard this before or you know this. Agile is not a silver bullet. It's not a process that's going to fix everything that's broken. It's like looking in a mirror. It'll identify the blemishes. It'll help make these things more visible, but Agile is not going to fix these things inherently. Agile is a technique for continuously improving while you're continuously adapting to the inevitable changes in the business. So balance expectations between management, leadership, customer community, and delivery team members, and think of Agile as a journey that you will continuously get better at over time if you focus on doing more than just Scrum by the book. And if you stick with Scrum by the book, then you probably won't see continuous improvements in performance. You need to look outside of the boundaries of Scrum. And I believe with that, I guess I do have one other thought here, and that is the big upfront design versus the incremental design. This is common, especially for data modelers. Those of you who are data modelers on the call, I suspect you've wrestled with this. I know I have, and that is there is some value in doing some upfront design and modeling. There is some fear and concern in doing evolutionary incremental modeling and how that's going to possibly impact the quality of the model. Also, it can be challenging as we talk about migrating production data from one version of a model to the next. So we really need to strike the right kind of balance between upfront design. By the way, this acronym YAGNI stands for "You Ain't Gonna Need It." It's a pretty familiar Agile acronym within the software community. We need to do a sufficient amount of design to get started working properly or working with a high quality design and toward a high quality end result. But we don't need to model for all possibilities until those possibilities emerge. So really watch out for the big upfront tendency, but do a sufficient amount of upfront design to get started. Ultimately, I want to leave you with this. Agile is not something that you become, it's something you become more of, and I don't take credit for this. Mike Cohn, who many of you may be familiar with, he's a prolific writer of books like Agile Estimating and Planning and Story Writing, or User Stories Defined. These are really powerful books, and I like his statement here. This is a journey. You will continuously get better at it if you hold your retrospectives and take actions on those. With that, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few remaining questions.
Great, thank you so much, Ken. At this point, we would like to move to the Q&A portion of our session. I think we have time for a few questions. Any questions that we don't get to, we would be happy to respond to. Ken would be happy to respond to by email. Again, to ask a question, just type it in the bar at the bottom of the Ask Your Questions here, or the Questions for Ken pod, and then click on the speech balloon to the right of that bar. Our first question, how do we handle business users who refuse to attend planning sessions and demos?
So this goes to something I said earlier. First of all, choose your business users carefully. Number one, I don't expect all business users to be excited about this. So you probably have some business users who are friends of the data warehousing and BI group. They're willing to partner with you. The commitment that I like to take with my business users, first of all, handpick them and ask them to be actively involved and engaged. Make a promise to them that you will not ask for more than 2 days of their time per month, and often it will be less than that. And then really carefully construct that time. Business users need Agile training just like Agile delivery teams need training. And so it'll be important to hold a session with those hand-picked business users so that you help them understand why you're being Agile, why this is beneficial to them, and what it is that you need from them in exchange so that they will actually get the right end result as part of, and they'll be part of the process. Hopefully that helps. Those are some of the techniques that I've found that work for that. And there will always be business users who will be difficult, and you just need to work around some of those people.
Great. I think we have time for a few more questions. The next question is, as a team leader, what metrics should I be using to track team performance?
I would say the first and most important measure is value delivered. So if you are using story points as a way to estimate story complexity or effort, Similarly, you can use value points, a relative measure of value that is largely driven by the business users, to assign value to each of the user stories on your backlog. I really like this metric because it is although it's relative, just like story points, it gives you a technique, it gives the group a technique for understanding which things have high value and how high that value is. Then you can use a burn-up chart over the life of a project. You can use a burn-up chart for tracking the value that's been delivered in each sprint. The other metric, or collection of metrics, I should say, that I really value are quality metrics. So I'm interested, and by the way, in the software community has come a lot farther than we have in data warehousing in this area. The ability to automatically collect metrics on an implemented system. So we still have some work to be done in this area. In fact, if any of you want to do this, I think there's some real opportunities to lead the thoughts. But what we need are metrics like presentation quality, data integration quality. It's just a general collection of information quality metrics that include data model quality, data content quality, data business logic, business rule quality. These kinds of things are really important alongside the value, the collection of value metrics. Certainly, there are the sprint by sprint metrics of burn down. How well has the team done at honoring its commitments every sprint, burning down to zero. So hopefully I'm using terminology that's familiar to you. These are mostly Scrum terms, but the idea of a burn down is the continuous, sort of almost linear completion of engineering tasks in order to be successful in honoring commitments in a sprint. There are probably some other metrics. I guess my general statement about metrics is that metrics should be team-oriented and outcomes-based rather than individual-oriented and task-based. What I mean by that is we want to encourage the team to think of themselves as a unit working together for a positive outcome, and we don't want the team to think of themselves as being micromanaged by us looking at the task level work that they're doing. Instead, it's about the outcomes. It's about the quality of the outcomes and the right outcomes. Okay.
Great. So I think we are at the end of our time period here. Thank you very much, Ken. And on behalf of everyone at Cutter, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Again, any unanswered questions will be responded to by email.
Thank you, everyone.
At kcollier@cutter.com. You'll also see that in the comments section. And please visit the events section on Cutter.com for information on other upcoming webinars and to register for our upcoming Cutter Summit. Thank you again, and have a good rest of the day.